Yeah, so it sort of I've always approached it, from the top down. So I'm solving one problem at a time. I don't, start out. If you have an app idea, you start out by creating a grand blueprint of how you want things to do. So I try to, solve things as they come, but try to, I think, optimize the uses of those things as much as possible.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of the Liquid Weekly podcast. I'm your host, Karl Meisterheim, and with me, as always, is the incredibly handsome, tall, muscular Taylor Page. Taylor, welcome
Wow.
back.
Thank you, Carl. Your intros for me get better each week. It's
I'm
a
working
good thing
on
we
it.
haven't seen each other in a long enough time. This is absence makes a heart grow fonder, I think,
Yeah, Taylor, you were just telling me before we started recording about how you actually figured out how to use Cloudflare rather than ngrok for your domain. That's great. But
Yes.
for many of us, Cloudflare still remains a bit of a mystery. It's something that we've heard many people talk about, not use. But you know what we've done? We have found a self-proclaimed Cloudflare expert. And today we're welcoming on the podcast Ole Thorup, who is a seasoned Shopify developer, the original creator of Accentuate Custom Fields. And then after selling that, he's continued to build in the ecosystem, including a new brand he's launched called Espresso. So Ole, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, should I just give
Well,
a
let me
little
ask you a
intro?
question. First of all,
Yeah,
yeah, give us a little intro about how you got into Shopify development. Where are you located? We don't know anything about you other than we really like you. All that good stuff.
yeah, yeah. So I live in Denmark, and
Oh,
yeah, in a smallish city called Silkeborg, in the main part of Denmark. Um, yeah, as is evident, I'm one of the older guys out there. I got into development, I think it would have to be about 40 years ago. So I'm pretty seasoned within developments. Got my first job back in '85, working with COBOL on mainframes, if you believe that.
Ooh, COBOL. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. So I spent most of my career doing banking, telecom stuff, and ultimately went into more web-like developments for actually a telecom company, and then actual web development later on in I think around 2010 or something. So I actually opened up my own web shop in 2007, I think, selling sunglasses of if you would believe that.
I mean, it's not coffee
And
Um,
mugs, but it's something.
I say it's better than coffee mugs. So yeah, that's
yeah. So yeah, I quickly got tired of that, and I opened a web shop selling men's watches, which was I ran that for a number of years. That was pretty exciting. Getting the official brand, what is they called, brand offering for a number of watch brands. So that
wow,
was
that's
pretty
awesome.
cool. Yeah, that was exciting to work with. I think I didn't have any prior knowledge of watches or anything, but I just jumped into it from you know a merchant perspective, and then I grew an interest in collecting watches and so on. It was hard not to try out different watches when you actually bought them home and had them in stock, sold them. So you had a lot of different watches to, pass you by, and then you could
Yeah.
have a look at them. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
So
yeah.
how many do you own now?
Sorry. Uh,
How many watches do you own
I think I have around 10 or something. So
now?
it's not too bad.
It's a lot of watches.
Yeah. So yeah. I think I switched to Shopify as a merchant as part of that journey, and I don't remember, that was perhaps 2010 or something. So
Okay.
I was on board Shopify pretty early in the years.
Yeah.
It was rather limited, but still the best thing out there compared to other systems. So
Yep.
yeah, I got to know it pretty intimately from the merchant perspective. And later on, I actually sold that shop to someone who wanted it more than me at that point. And I jumped into app development because I thought, why not? Let's see what we can do here. And tried out a few things. Didn't go out so well. And then ultimately went to launch Accentuate, which turned out to be a pretty sticky thing, actually. So that was great.
So
How
what
did you
year
how did you
did you bring
stumble
that
into
to market?
Metafields
Yeah.
too? Oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, Carl's wanting to know yours, but Metafields, I feel like we're such a like not a super well documented, not a super well known thing. Really like early days in particular. So how did you stumble into that?
I I can't really remember. I think I stumbled into it. I think you had from a merchant perspective. I wanted to. I didn't sort of realize it at that time when I was a merchant, but I sort of you would do a product listing of say a specific watch. You will always end up having a lot of bullet points for case size,
Hmm.
strap material, and whatnot.
Yeah, a lot of technical
So
specifications for things like
yeah,
watches
exactly.
and
Yeah, I
yeah.
think
Hmm.
when later on when exploring what type of app could I do, that came to mind that we could use Metafields as good placement for instructions, materials, washing instructions, and so on.
Hmm.
So yeah, basically it it was pretty limited at first, but customers were signing up for it and requesting different things. So it
Hmm.
was very quickly grew into sort of a want to be CMS system for Shopify. So
Yeah.
a lot of the sort of field types and features that was built into Accentuate, we could see that being eventually, replicated. That is a harsh thing to say by Shopify, but at least they adopted a lot of that stuff that we already develop in Accentuate.
Yeah, there were a lot of that. I know that there's a lot of pushback, to some degree, like where app developers get kind of upset about how, you know, um, Shopify kind of benefits from their innovation to some degree, and they bake it right into the platform.
Yeah, I wouldn't claim that Shopify, adopted anything from my little app there. So, but since Metafields was already a thing, we just, built upon
Hmm.
the infrastructure. So it was a
Yeah.
very uh, close thing for them to just, put in an offering for actually being able to edit Metafields
Hmm.
from within the admin, which was only possible using an app for a lot of years, actually. So
Yeah. Did you all ever use the before you created the app? Did you ever use that hacky like you could just hit the routes just in the URL, which led to a lot of spelling errors and creating additional meta fields? Have you ever heard or seen people doing that? I was doing
no,
that for a while with people.
no,
Um,
there was a sort of a theme hack that where
yeah.
people put in a sort of delimiter in their product description and then had a
Hmm.
sort of a semi markup in the HTML,
Hmm. Yep.
pointing out the different things that they wanted to be split out in their theme
Uh huh.
for whatever. You wanted to have a description and then an even longer description that would split it through some character convention.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that was the hacky stuff back then. So
Right.
so sure.
Yeah. And so you went from and you worked on Accentuate for some time. Built that out, very very successful app. I think that was a lot of people's go-to recommendation for a long time. When
Yeah.
it came to managing Metafields. What happened after that?
After we sold the app, you mean? Yeah. So I wanted to, keep developing. This is, what one do. So we started, and when I say we, this is me and my son, who is part of the company.
That's awesome.
So we started developing the what came to be the Espresso bulk editor, and now also the Espresso Live Metafields app. So we are sort of, trying to build on what we learned,
Hmm.
marketing and supporting Accentuate, just, trying out some different stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the background, Ole. That's really cool. And your son, in terms of helping out, is he also doing the development technical work, or is he more on like the marketing sales side, or how do you guys combine forces?
Yeah, so he's more like the product UI UX
Mm,
expert here, and I'm the
Gotcha.
backend infrastructure development. So we try
Yeah.
to balance it as good as we can.
So
Yeah.
speaking of the backend infrastructure piece, you have done some pretty exciting things with utilizing Cloudflare to make that life easy for yourself or less painful. Um, we've got a whole bunch of things here we'd love to chat about, but I say we just dive in to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So um, building Accentuate. Accentuate was a place where you could upload your own images because you couldn't use Shopify APIs for that at that time. So
hmm
we had an sort of an external upload feature going on, and we wanted to serve those images back to the customer's themes when they use the URL stored in that meta field. And after trying out a number of things, I discovered that Cloudflare could be a very good option um, for storing images in their buckets and providing a CDN on top of that. So that was my first adventure into Cloudflare, and they just kept developing. They have kept developing ever since. So you are at this point, it's even hard to keep up with what they are offering.
Right.
So yeah. So a lot of new stuff has been released. Queue management, durable objects with SQL backing of storage, workflows, log observability, and a lot of other things. Now they're also
Yeah.
pushing a lot of AI
hmm
compatibility at this point.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people. So when I think of Cloudflare, obviously you're thinking like DNS management or whatever, like kind of like early on. That was probably what they were most known for. And it sounds so. Your initial kind of introduction more so to Cloudflare was a solution for asset management and those sorts of things for merchants, probably.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
opposed
So
to, yeah, a lot of people might have gone the route. I know a lot of people love Amazon for that, right? Like, S3 storage, whatever, buckets for that, kind of type thing.
yeah,
But Cloudflare ended up being a better deal. I hear a lot about workers. A lot of people love them for everything. Is that something that you're using too right now?
yeah, exactly. What you can do is you can use their offerings in a number of ways. The easiest
Sure.
way would be queues. Sorry, the workers, because if you wanted to produce a message to a queue, you would use a worker or
hmm
their API. But the easiest thing being, just call a function from a worker saying into the put this message into the queue. And if you wanted to consume something from the queue, you would just write a simple function called queue, and you have it. It will be the messages will be pushed into that function. So
Gotcha.
depending
So
on your configuration.
so workers are kind of like serverless functions in a sense, kind of type thing.
Yeah. A
Okay.
worker is a serverless function. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
And a worker would just be the codes that you run as a result of a function invocation. It's like a webhook or a user typing a URL into their browser. So you would do whatever that route would, in your logic, be told to do. And even if you have thousands of requests, Cloudflare would just scale that up horizontally and serve all the requests at the same time. So
Nice.
you are not actively involved in scaling. It basically just happens.
Right. And that's kind of like the best of both worlds for everyone that's in app management, right? Like if you don't have to worry about scaling for when, your app finally hits or something like that or whatever, or big seasons, big selling seasons like Black Friday, when you can kind of outsource the scale to somebody else who really already has all that in play, like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of the best. I've heard some people talk a little bit too about when we're talking about workers, serverless functions, that Cloudflare does a little bit differently too with how it bills for those, right? Like there's a difference between like, is it runtime and like I'm fumbling through a lot of this stuff, but I think that's one of the things people like about how Cloudflare handles that.
Yeah, so basically the easiest option you have is just develop it locally, and you can run they have a small program called Wrangler, which you can run locally and
Okay.
develop you can run a worker locally on your laptop and just have you, as you mentioned in the beginning, have a Cloudflare tunneling the requests to your domain through to your laptop, just like you would
Nice.
run ngrok.
Okay.
And then you basically just, develop your worker in JavaScript or TypeScript, and then tell Wrangler to deploy it eventually to their infrastructure, and they would massage the runtime code around your code and upload that as a bundle solution. So when you eventually look at the complete code on the Cloudflare, you would have a single function, perhaps 40,000 lines of code, which perhaps the 1,000 lines would be your code,
Wow.
and
That's
the rest
awesome.
is boilerplate and wrapping around calling Cloudflare internal stuff.
Nice.
So yeah, developer experience really good. You can test locally, easy to deploy, and it just scales with your demands. So the the sort of the thing you have to look out for is that you should watch your usage. There are generous free tiers. It's easy to get started, cheap to get started, but if the use of your app ramps up too quickly and you haven't thought about how to manage your assets, then things start to cost money eventually, as it
Yeah.
would in AWS, of course.
Yeah, sure. So is that something as far as like you said, like you've thought about that, like you've had to make some adjustments kind of to ensure like that scale doesn't bite you too much. Do you have any tips there for people that are having to think about that?
Yeah, it sort of depends on what you're doing, right? So
Hmm.
if you are using, for example, you can use Cloudflare. You can hook up a CDN that would be, pulling the actual, say it was images from a server elsewhere, like on DigitalOcean or in an S3 bucket, for example. If you were to do that,
Hmm.
you can play around with um, that when the worker would hit your origin, that would incur a worker. What should we call it? The invocation, right?
Hmm.
So you can play around with your CDN settings, optimizing for Cloudflare to cache that specific image, so it can be served more optimized for the end user. So
Sure.
depending if whether you're using CDN queues, workflows, or whatnot, you will have to optimize in each instance.
Sure.
So I think hard to know, no golden tips, I'm afraid, but
Right.
the caveat here is of course you watch your usage of something, so you
Sure.
potentially can be a huge consumer of Cloudflare infrastructure.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. You rely on caching when possible, essentially, right? Like, because your workers do have a bit of a hit there. So if you can mitigate that to some degree with assets or whatever is it's being used regularly, leverage that where you can.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
So maybe I'm just dense and didn't quite get it, but my background's always been in server-side Rails app development, where you have the database in the back and everything. Can you sort of describe to me how you approach architecting your app and how the different pieces function in Cloudflare?
Yeah, so it sort of I've always approached it, from the top down. So I'm solving one problem at a time. I don't, start out. If you have an app idea, you start out by creating a grand blueprint of how you want things to do. So I try to, solve things as they come, but try to, I think, optimize the uses of those things as much as possible. So if we go back to the Accentuate starting years, if you have a limited amount of customers footing the bill, you try to optimize a lot as possible. Of course, you don't want your CDN usage to be too expensive. If you have $1,000 of income, you can't spend $900 on CDN expenses. So you find ways to make things work as optimal as possible. But I never had that, let's architect the whole thing approach. More like let's cross the bridge when we get to it.
So it's more like you're still going with your traditional stack or what have you kind of type thing, and you're just using Cloudflare, kind of baking it in to help some of those pieces where you can find it can optimize things in particular.
Exactly, yeah. I think specifically for the new Espresso apps, they have become more serverless heavy, if you will. So there is a much more strict division between what is the app UI's interface, consumer facing, powering the UI for the merchants, and then you have some serverless functions running in the background, being triggered by messages or some mechanism from the UI facing part of the app. So yeah, I think a lot of things move to being serverless. From my perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense.
And as far as the tech stack goes, I know because you're not even using Polaris, I don't think, for the front end, right? Like I think we had talked about that before. You're using a different library.
Yeah, for the bulk editor, we are using TanStack table and the Shatsian UI components. But for the Espresso Live Metafields, it's actually a Polaris front end this time.
Oh, okay,
because
gotcha.
we wanted to explore that a bit, and that app is for the UI perspective much more simple. There are some fields you either need to turn them on or turn them off, and that's basically it. The rest is handled server side based on what has been activated for each merchant. But yeah, I do enjoy the Polaris library, but it also quickly becomes, as is the intention, looks more uniform for the merchant. Certainly a good thing for something, and perhaps a bit limiting if you have a more advanced user interface.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to it too. It blending into the admin a little too well, where if the merchant doesn't realize they're almost in a different app.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good to some degree, right? Because they're comfortable and it makes it easier to use, maybe because it follows a lot of the same patterns, but not ideal in the sense of like you're trying to get them to remember who you are because they want, you need more customers. You need them to remember like, oh, I like this app. It's great. And it's not native to Shopify, right?
Yeah, exactly. It more and more looks like an extension to Shopify rather than your brand look and feel. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the back end? Carl's gonna cry if it's not Rails. So we can pretend it's Rails. I don't think it's Rails though. I don't remember.
It's not. It's a remix and the JavaScript.
Oh, okay. How do you like Remix?
Yeah, I do like it a lot actually. So I can understand why Shopify is pushing that. I like it a lot. I'm not sure I'm using it the way it should be used. I think there is this is also these two apps, the Espresso apps. This is my first adventure into React development. So I'm hoping I'm using it correctly, but yeah, it works. So
I say it works. So you've got to be using it correctly. Well, I mean, so and back a little bit to I know I'm getting a little off topic from Cloudflare, and that's our main topic. I was interested a little bit because I think some of the newer stuff that you had kind of mentioned offhand, and I know that goes a little bit hand in hand with like workers and things like this is the queues. I think like queues and workflows. I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that. I'm assuming that's something that can be helpful potentially with getting lots of requests, like rate limiting with Shopify APIs and those sorts of things that you're dealing with. I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit. I think that would be pretty interesting to hear about.
Yeah, so specifically around queues, that is something that has gone to general availability around, I think, sometime last year, and which offers the, a more, I'm trying to find the right word, a better way to handle multiple requests you don't want to, have performed right away, because having a Shopify backend as your way to go, that is rate limited, you need a way to store your requests. And if Shopify stops you and you are getting rate limited, you want to retry that request at a later time, right? So as you're offering your worker, you might want to, instead of processing, say, a request right away, you would offload that as a message to the queue and have the other parts of your code, the part that consumes the message from that queue, take over that request, and then go to Shopify, see can we now get what we want. If not, put the message back into the queue, try again in a few seconds, and so on. So
now, does it do retries automatically through queues, or is that logic you're having to build in?
You can simply say to the message that comes that you want it to be retried. So it's a function that comes with the message. So it's very clean interface. You get a message object. You can either acknowledge that you now have processed it, or you want it to be retried. And then you can have some internal stuff around when do you want it to be retried, and then step up the the time delay incrementally, so you don't eventually you will have like 5,000 requests. They will all want to be processed right now, and you need to put them back into the queue, right? So you will spend a considerable amount of time tweaking out your settings for retrying. You could tell Cloudflare how many messages can you process simultaneously at a given time. So you can set that to, say, 10. That might be a bit too much according to your Shopify API rate limiting, and either you adjust your delay mechanism, or you turn down how many messages you want to process at a single time. So it could get a bit finicky here. So this is not something that vibe coding would help you out with. So there's only one way to go here, and that is simply to try it out. And when you then try it out, you move your app into production, and you will be surprised to see how many products and orders these big customers actually have. So if you are trying to, keep up to date with how many product updates, webhooks you actually get from those, and you'll be glad you implemented queues and some solid retry logic.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a story there, Ole. Did you have an experience with an early app when you first got into production where you were taken aback or caught off guard by how much utilization you were seeing?
I think some of the early customers we had on the bulk editor took us by surprise. We were not expecting to see stores with more than 100,000 products. We sort of, you live and learn, right? So you adapt and try to implement limits to see how many can we actually realistically load into a full-blown table in the browser at any given point, right? So you adapt. Let's say that.
That's cool. And with the queue system in Cloudflare, how does the pricing work around that? If you end up having to do a bunch of retries and requeues, does that just incrementally increase the cost, or is it?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not super expensive per message, but
Sure.
You have to ensure that you don't activate too many. Let's say if you have something that could potentially block your processing of a given message, like Shopify's rate limiting, you would have to try that out as early as possible when you are about to process something, so you can put that message back to the queue if it's not its time, so you don't start to ramp up other costs and then realize that you couldn't carry through the transaction anyway. Yeah, gotcha. It's hard to come with a solid advice here. That you would have to be prepared to see levels of traffic you weren't expecting to see when you actually go into production and get real life customers. It's hard to.
You can be as prepared as possible, right? But ultimately, until it's live, then you're still going to have to pivot at some point.
Yeah, it's hard to test a large amount of orders coming in when you're just sitting in your test store and manually typing in orders to see how does your logic work. Then you move into production, and a store comes along. They have 30,000 orders per month. There's nothing for them, so it just floods your worker with requests. So you would be happy that you are on a platform that can scale, and you have implemented some mechanism to control that, which we for Espresso bulk editor already had, because we wanted to have a mechanism for when you are publishing changes to, say, 1,000 products and wanted to have those carried into Shopify, we already knew that we had to have a delivery mechanism for running mutations, at scale. So we can't just, throw 1,000 mutations to Shopify without hitting a rate limit. So you are using queues to manage that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and is that so? Some of those kind of surprises that you've mentioned, we've got some notes in here too to talk about. Is that something related to alarms? Is that something like, hey, like this is a problem? I don't know. I didn't actually research this on Cloudflare at all. Is that something related to that?
It's just alarms is something that comes with the another part of the Cloudflare offering, which is the durable objects. A durable object in Cloudflare is like having a class in your code. You can instantiate, say you can have like an object for a specific product, right? One specific product in Shopify. And then if you have a store with 10,000 products, you can have 10,000 durable objects. And each durable object is sort of isolated from one another. They all have the same stub of code, but what they have in stored as key values or in their SQLite table is unique to them, and that durable object can then have an alarm. Say if you wanted to wake up a product every 30 minutes to see if it needs to do something. You can set an alarm, which you can react upon, do some logic, put it back, snooze your alarm clock, and then it can wake you up again in 30 minutes. So you can have objects with a certain, abstractly speaking, time to live for a specific object. You can even communicate with a single object through WebSockets. So you can have say a browser session communicating with a specific durable object running server side, right? So it sounds weird. You have to, work a bit with this, but it's really powerful to have instead of rows in a database, these are sort of objects live in memory, so to speak, which you can interact with through your code.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there's a good, simple example you could give for that. But I imagine this is probably something you're using heavily with, like, live Metafields.
Exactly, yeah. So, because instead of, that would be one example. Say you have a product for which you have turned on a live Metafield, which calculates its own rank within the store. Which is this the best-selling product or not within a certain time frame. So you can, every time a new order comes in, you can of course recalculate that product, saying, is this still the best seller? So that the order would be the trigger here, but also as time passes and orders can move out of your 30-day window, you can use alarms to sort of recalculate every hour, every fourth hour, for example, what is the state of this exact product when compared to the orders that are in the 30-day window, right? Because orders can move out of relevance just because time passes, right? Not because a new order comes in. So this is something that we use heavily in live Metafields to keep stuff in sync. Just because time passes, there is a date change, then something that we are keeping track of daily would have to be reset just because the day changes. So this is
Yeah, that
something
makes
that
a lot
we
of sense.
use. Yeah, this is
And
something we
something
use quite
particularly
heavily.
that seems very helpful in particular. I mean, we're talking about app scale a lot or whatever kind of type thing, but mainly like we're talking about like, how helpful this is for merchants that have huge product sets or what have you, because it's not a big deal even for a couple hundred products for, a handful of merchants to just know they know their customers, their orders, how things are moving well enough to like we could manually go in and update that, right? But when you're starting to talk about thousands of products,
Exactly. Yeah.
that becomes super hard to track. So
Yeah.
that's a really helpful example for that.
Yeah. You could imagine that if you couldn't utilize stuff like queues, durable objects, and so on, you would have a hard time, simply setting up a lot of scheduled jobs to walk through the store. When you're done, you have to start over and see what is the new state of this store. So having things live more organically, so to speak, inside whatever magic Cloudflare is doing to make this work, that is a huge help.
Now you mentioned in here too as well observability and logs. I don't know if there's something that you'd had wanted to make a note of that as well. So I as a non-app dev, theme dev trying to get into app dev, I have found. I mean, obviously when you're doing stuff in the front end, I log stuff like crazy as well to try to figure out how things are happening. So what's something that Cloudflare is doing here that makes it helpful or unique maybe for how you're using it that you found from the app side of things where you're working with tons of merchants at scale?
Yeah, so observability is, when we're talking logs at least, is it's key to understand what has happened if something went wrong, right? It's pretty trivial to log that now you are processing this product, it's complete, and so on, carry on. But when something goes wrong, you have to have an idea of why, right? So you having a log with reasonably large retention periods, like at least 7 days, is key to supporting merchants. If something has been calculated wrong or there was an error and something, we need to figure out why that happened. So Cloudflare, it's a pretty new thing. They introduced observability or logging as part of their offering. So it's easier to see which logs are attached to which workers you have. So you're not, logs for Espresso, bulk editor versus live Metafields are, of course, two very different things. So they can be easily separated and connected through request IDs and what have you in Cloudflare. I understand it quickly gets a bit abstract when just talking about it. It would be much more powerful to, have a whole lecture on how things is going on. A lot of people would be much better to explain that than I would. I'm a more, let's start using this feature and learn from it, and then, observe and retry in a different way if it didn't work. So
Yeah, it sounds like it's really helpful just from that perspective where you're just kind of exploring some of the things almost at this point of like, what can we use here kind of type thing.
exactly, yeah. I think when you have different apps, have different problem areas to solve, when you then read about some feature which can be completely unrelated, like, oh, there is a new security role for something, and you can get the idea that this could be useful for my use case, and then try it out, adapt into your code. Does it solve this in a better way, perhaps more cost efficient? So really, it just depends on what you're trying to achieve with your app. But I've been using AWS for their event hook sort of, what's it called? There is a Shopify partner implementation, right, for webhooks. When you set up your app, you can opt to have your webhooks delivered to AWS Event Bridge. And then from there, you can write them to a queue or whatever you want. This is very sort of deliverability, if that's a word, is very high. You rarely see messages not being delivered to AWS because, it's a cloud-based platform, high reliability and so on. But the developer experience in AWS, I always hated that. So I, moved my stuff to Cloudflare and has been a happy camper ever since.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, and you haven't noticed any degradation or whatever in like deliverability necessarily, or whatever. You're still like high deliverability, no issues or concerns there, as far as that goes, and the developer experience going up. I mean, that's like wins across the board. And cost wise, it's probably comparable to some degree.
Yeah, I would suggest that Cloudflare is cheaper to have them process the webhooks. I think from a developer's perspective, simplicity always wins because it just makes more sense than you are setting up a lot of weird rules in AWS just to have your webhook delivered to your worker. Eventually, why not have Shopify deliver it straight to your worker and be done with it?
Well, simplicity wins because we're already really bad at overcomplicating things. So we need simplicity wherever we can get it.
Yeah, exactly. So as someone who's fighting both backend infrastructure as well as trying to understand the React front end stuff, things are complicated enough as it is.
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting close to the point we want to transition, but before we do, I want to give you a chance, Ole, to just share in a few minutes here, what's next for Espresso Brands? What's your focus? What do you expect from you in the future?
Yeah, I think we are trying to take a step back and just focus on the live Metafields. I have a lot of ideas when my head gets the best of me. I have a lot of ideas to what you can build in terms of app to do competitor pricing or backup solutions and so on, because we have a lot of interesting infrastructure in place to handle that. But from a marketing perspective, we need to focus on one app at a time. Right? So at this point, we will be trying to push the live Metafields app quite heavily. That would be the task for the coming summer.
Good.
That's awesome.
And if someone wanted to learn more about the app or get in touch with you, we'll give some information at the end or in the notes about how to do that. But is there anything else you'd like to say to developers out there who might be interested in using the app?
I don't know. Let's try it out. See what it can do. I think it's of course I would have to think that, but it's an important piece of plumbing that Shopify needs, in my perspective. And we had some really awesome feedback from the customers we have. So pretty excited about it. So try it out.
Very good. Well, Taylor, this is the time where if your soundboard was working, you would probably interject some kind of transition sound. But do you want to bring the changelog to light?
All right, that's changelog. We need a good transition sound. We'll find a good transition sound here at some point. But changelog, yes, absolutely. So new opacity. I almost say capacity. New opacity controls for theme colors. So this was kind of an exciting new thing if you're a theme dev. Potentially limiting some theme setting controls, kind of in an experimental beta phase right now. You need to use quote unquote modern CSS color syntax, which I found from this changelog announcement. I'm not using modern color syntax for my CSS, so thanks for that, Shopify. However, definitely going to take a look at this. It's using color mix properties and stuff like this. It looks pretty neat, so definitely check that out if you're a theme dev or someone working in themes and you need to deal with color. New fun stuff for you to check out there. All app devs rejoice. App ratings now factor into trust signals, with reviews from lower trust shops now carry less weight. So Shopify has heard the groaning and bemoaning of all of these other shops that are using your app for 13 seconds and has only been around for a week. And now their not so great reviews now carry less weight when it comes to your overall rating. So I think that is a welcome addition there. And then there's some other information as well here as well in the changelog about new inventory transfer experiences available for testing in dev preview. So if you deal with inventory controls and things of this nature, there is a new developer preview you can check at the moment. Won't go too heavily into details there, but it is good not just for online store, but also POS solution providers. POS is becoming a bigger and bigger deal these days. You're seeing this pop up a lot more in the changelog. So people that are paying attention, if you're building or looking for a space to build, POS is kind of becoming very, very interesting. And last but not least, creating smart collections automatically with product category ID with descendants. So basically a field that you can use to create smart collections and automated collections now. The idea behind this is to marry this a little bit better with the new updated product taxonomy that Shopify is pushing. And so I think particularly, Ole, I'm sure this is something that's probably piqued your interest as well with live Metafields and the bulk editing, something that you're probably paying attention to as well. So check that out if that's of interest to y'all too. I think that'll be helpful for people who are concerned about dealing with those. This is kind of all in line with, again, this product taxonomy, standard category Metafields. Shopify is building a lot more controls around these and a lot more, obviously, surfaces for us to do stuff with that in the admin. So feel free to check that out. I think that was some of the more exciting things here lately.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. You always do such a good job distilling the essence of what we need to know every 2 weeks. These nuggets. I did see recently, too, that they announced that they're going to be posting all the Dev Changelog entries to the Shopify Dev forums as topics so that people could comment and interact on them.
Yeah, I saw that.
Nice. I missed that.
Did you miss that? So I found something you didn't know about. You're welcome. You are welcome.
All right, I need to be up on this, Karl. I'm slipping, Karl.
Yeah, well, can't always be me. All right, so now it's time for the third half of our show where we talk about our picks of the week. Again, this is something that we just simply enjoy. It could be tech, it could be non-tech, it could be something you eat, it could be something you watch or listen to. Ole, do you want to go first, or do you need a moment to think about yours?
Well, you did prepare me here, so I think my pick of the week would be, if you haven't seen it already, be sure to binge watch the Black Mirror season 7, I think.
You finished it?
Of course. It came out a few days ago.
Of course.
Yeah, I think that would be my pick of the week. It's always interesting to see the episodes now.
Yeah, well, if you're in for a weekend of feel goodness, join Ole and watch the uplifting and always encouraging Black Mirror season 7. That stuff's hard to take, Ole. It's a little touches.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, Black Mirror season 7. I'll go next. Save you all from Taylor for a few more seconds. Mine is actually a book, although Ole did trigger a thought. Andor season 2 comes out next week, which I'm super excited about. Just rewatched season 1. Such a good Star Wars show. They should have made them all like that. Check that out. But my real pick is a book, actually, I found. I don't remember how this came up, but I was doing some online reading, and someone mentioned this book and that it was one of the inspirations for the Indiana Jones franchise. And I thought, well, I love Indiana Jones, especially the first 3. So check it out. It's called King Solomon's Mines. It was published in 1885 by H. Rider Haggard. And it's a story of Englishmen who go on an adventure looking for King Solomon's mines, and I don't know. There's something about British period drama that I just find enjoyable, and the same thing with this book, which was written in the 19th century. Just the way that they write and the way that they view the worlds is very interesting. Not always great, but very interesting. So it's a good book. Check that out. Well written.
All right.
Nice.
I know, Taylor,
For my pick, I'm going to pick another podcast, and not just another podcast, another Shopify podcast. So this might be breaking rules here to be promoting another podcast on here. But talkingshop.dev, it is a podcast from Kaylin Jordan and David Robinson. They both bring a lot of really interesting perspectives, I guess, from the Shopify side of things. David works for a brand, and Kaylin has got a lot of experience just all over the place, automation and a whole lot of different things, and he's consulting and freelancing now as well. And so they talk just about Shopify Dev, really interesting, fun podcast. And so check that out when you have a chance. It's a fun listen.
That sounds good. I can't wait to check it out. And for Car, I mean, if you want to listen to them instead of us during your workout, that's fine. I heard a little bit, but I understand.
Car works out like 10 hours a week, so he needs more podcasts to listen to.
Needs more podcasts, okay.
He's got a lot of time in the gym, man.
You can just listen to half speed. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there. But we've wasted another perfectly good hour. You could have been spending coding listening to the Liquid Weekly podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Ole, thanks for coming on the show. It's great having you.
Thank you.
Can't wait more into Cloudflare. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Happy hacking.